Captain Elias Thorne gripped the console as the Endeavor's hull groaned under the relentless Zorath barrage, the alien plasma bolts slamming into the shields with the fury of a cosmic storm. The bridge was a chaos of flashing red alerts and acrid smoke, the air thick with the stench of overheating circuits and the metallic tang of fear-sweated uniforms. "Evasive maneuvers now," he barked, his voice slicing through the din like a laser cutter. Commanding attention from his beleaguered crew, sparks erupted from a nearby panel, showering the deck in fiery embers that hissed against the grated floor. Lieutenant Mara Voss, the cautious navigator whose steady hands had pulled them through a dozen tight spots before, punched the commands into the flickering holograph display without a moment's hesitation. Her fingers danced across the interface, rerouting power from non-essential systems like life support and secondary lighting, the ship's priorities shifting in a desperate bid for survival. "Thrusters at 80%, sir," she reported, her tone measured but laced with urgency, eyes fixed on the tactical overlay where enemy locks pulsed like predatory heartbeats. "But their targeting systems are adaptive. Those Zorath bastards have evolved for this kind of hunt. We're outmatched if we don't shake them soon." The ship lurched violently to port, the inertial dampeners struggling to compensate as stars streaked past the viewport in blurred trails of white fire. Another plasma volley scorched the void mere meters from their hull, the heat rippling the energy shields like a mirage in the black. The Zorath fleet swarmed around them, a deadly hive of sleek iridescent vessels that gleamed with an otherworldly sheen under the distant starlight. Their intercepted transmissions echoed through the bridge speakers, a chorus of arrogant superiority. "Primitives fail against our perfected evolution. Your expansion is an affront to the natural order." From the lower decks, Ensign Kai Ren patched into the comms, his voice crackling over the line with that trademark forced levity that masked the grim reality below. The witty engineer was knee-deep in the engine bay, sweat beading on his brow as he wrestled with failing systems. "Bridge engineering here. Shields holding at 30%, but if we take one more direct hit, we're confetti across the sector. Got any of that human ingenuity left, Cap? Or are we just donating our atoms to the void today?" Thorne's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing on the tactical display where red blips swarmed like angry insects closing the noose. The Zorath had ambushed them in the neutral sector, far from any friendly lines, claiming that humanity's expansion into the stars threatened their so-called evolutionary purity. It was ideological nonsense wrapped in advanced tech, but the stakes were brutally real. Lose this fight, and the vulnerable colony on Epsilon 4 would be next. No backup fleets, no reinforcements rushing to the rescue. Just a handful of outposts clinging to survival in a galaxy that saw humans as little more than pests. He leaned forward, mind racing through fragments of Academy simulations and spacer lore, piecing together a desperate gambit. "Voss, plot a slingshot trajectory around that asteroid cluster dead ahead. Ren, vent plasma from the exhaust ports, make us look like a dying duck. Critical systems failing." It was a plan born of grit rather than tactical brilliance, a feint to buy precious seconds in a fight they couldn't win head-on. Voss nodded, her cautious nature yielding to the raw urgency of the moment, her fingers locking in the course with precise efficiency. "Aye, sir." Trajectory locked and stabilizing. The Endeavor banked hard, engines whining in protest as they hurtled toward the jagged asteroid field, a graveyard of cosmic debris tumbling in lazy, unpredictable orbits. Alarms shrieked through the bridge, Zorath targeting locks tightening like a vice, their adaptive algorithms learning the ship's evasion patterns faster than the onboard AI could counter. Ren's laugh burst over the comms, sharp and defiant, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Venting now, Cap. Let's see if their vaunted evolution can handle a little human sleight of hand." From the rear view screen, a plume of blue plasma flared behind them, blooming into the void and mimicking the signature of a catastrophic engine failure. The Zorath ships hesitated, their precise formations fracturing as onboard algorithms recalibrated, second-guessing the apparent vulnerability. Thorne watched the scopes intently, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. It had bought them seconds, not salvation, a fleeting reprieve in the face of overwhelming odds. But then a stray volley from the trailing ships grazed their shields, the impact buckling a section of the energy field with a thunderous crack that reverberated through the hull. "Status report," Thorne demanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "Shields down to 15%, Voss replied. her voice holding firm but edged with the strain of constant recalculations. "Asteroids coming into range. 30 seconds until we're in the thick of it." The cluster loomed larger now, a menacing sprawl of pitted rocks and icy fragments against the starfield, promising either sanctuary or swift destruction. Thorn's mind flashed to the bigger picture. Not just the Endeavor and her crew, but the fragile chain of human outposts scattered across the frontier, each one a testament to humanity's stubborn push into the unknown. The Zorath's superiority wasn't myth. Their biology allowed them to interface directly with their technology, predicting human moves before they fully formed. But humans? They improvised. They endured. They turned desperation into defiance. Ren chimed in again from engineering, his sarcasm a thin veil over the sweat and sparks surrounding him. "Cap, I've got an idea. Reroute the waste recyclers to flood the vents with coolant. It'll freeze that plasma trail into a damn shield wall behind us. Block their sensors for a bit longer." "Risky move," Voss muttered, glancing sidelong at Thorn, her caution flaring as she weighed the potential backlash. "Could backfire and ice up our own engines if the flow doesn't balance right." Thorn didn't hesitate, trust in his crew, the glue holding them together amid the fraying ship. "Do it, Ren. Voss, keep us weaving through those shadows." The Endeavor plunged into the asteroid field, the ship shuddering as it navigated the narrow gaps between tumbling behemoths, proximity alarms blaring a frantic symphony. Zorath fire intensified, plasma lances carving glowing scars through the void. But the feint held. The lead enemy vessel overshot its mark, slamming into a drifting rock with a silent bloom of debris and shattered hull plating. A flicker of triumph lit Thorn's eyes, short-lived as a secondary blast from the pack clipped their starboard wing, shearing off a bank of sensors in a shower of twisted metal and electrical discharge. Alarms wailed anew, systems failing in cascade. "We're blind on starboard side," Voss announced, her hands already rerouting what auxiliary sensors she could salvage. "Compensating, but it's rough." Thorn stood from his chair, defiant against the mounting chaos, his posture a beacon for the crew. "Keep pushing forward. We've got this." But deep down he knew the cost was mounting, shields crumbling, systems straining, and the Zorath adapting with every passing second. Thorn's grip tightened on the armrests of his command chair as the Endeavor lurched sideways once more, the hull protesting the violent, evasive twist with deep, resonant groans that echoed through the decks. Sparks danced erratically from the starboard console, where Voss's fingers flew across the flickering panels, her face etched with the grim focus of someone who had patched too many hull breaches in her long career. Each one a lesson in fragility. "Power diverted to port thrusters," she announced, her voice steady despite the beads of sweat tracing lines down her forehead, the cabin's recycled air growing heavy with tension. "But we're leaking atmosphere in Section 3. If we don't seal it soon, we'll be breathing vacuum." "Sir?" The bridge lights dimmed further, casting elongated shadows over the crew stations, turning the space into a cavern of flickering holographs and urgent whispers. Down in the engineering access alcove, Ren crouched by an exposed panel, yanking out a bundle of singed cables that sparked and hissed like angry serpents. His hands, calloused from years toiling in the engine bays amid the roar of fusion cores, worked with mechanical precision, splicing wires and coaxing life back into the dying systems. "These Zorath bastards are adapting faster than we can blink," Ren growled, twisting a connector into place with a grunt, the acrid smell of melting insulation filling his nostrils. "Their fire patterns, it's like they're predicting our every dodge. We can't outrun them forever, Cap. They're too damn efficient." Thorn's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of their dire situation like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. What had started as a routine scouting mission for habitable worlds in the Epsilon Eridani system had devolved into a desperate fight for survival. Ambushed near the asteroid belt by these iridescent predators from the outer rim, the Zorath ships moved with an eerie, almost organic grace, their plasma weapons carving through space like living flames that hungered for human hulls. Intercepted transmissions played on loop in his head, the aliens scorning humanity's fragile forms and outdated tech, boasting of their superior evolution as if it were divine right. But Thorn knew better than to buy into their propaganda. Evolution wasn't about reaching some pinnacle of perfection. It was about adaptation, raw and unrelenting. And humans had a knack for turning scraps of ingenuity into salvation when the odds were stacked against them. They'd survived ice ages on Earth and the void's endless hunger. This was just another trial by fire. Options? He barked. His eyes locked on the main view screen where the asteroid field loomed ahead. A jagged maze of tumbling rocks that could either shield them from pursuit or crush the Endeavor outright in an instant. Voss glanced up from her station, her cautious nature shining through even in the heat of battle, always the one to weigh risks before committing. We could vent the cargo bay, use the ejected debris as a smokescreen to obscure our signature. It would buy us time to reroute auxiliary power to the shields. Ren snorted from his spot on the floor, wiping grease from his brow with the back of his hand, his voice carrying up through the open comm. And lose half our supplies in the process? We're already running low on O2 recyclers and spare parts. No, Cap, we need to hit back. Target their sensor arrays with the railguns. Blind them like they're trying to blind us. Turn the tables for once. The ship bucked again as another plasma bolt from the trailing Zorath grazed their shields, the energy field shimmering like heat haze over a desert, absorbing the worst but sending tremors through the frame. Alarms blared in response. Red lights pulsing across the bridge in a frantic rhythm that matched Thorn's accelerating pulse. He felt the vibration deep in his bones, a stark reminder that every second they lingered shaved a little more off their dwindling lifespan. Leaning forward, Thorn's voice cut through the cacophony like a captain's order in a gale. Voss, execute the cargo vent. Ren, prep the railguns for a volley. Aim for the lead ship's dorsal fin. That's their weak point, straight from the Sims. Let's make them regret getting this close. Voss hesitated for a split second, her fingers pausing over the controls as she ran the probabilities in her head. The vent maneuver exposing their position if the Zorath traced the debris trail. Cap, the vent will make us a bigger target for a moment. If they trace the ejection pattern, do it, Thorn said firmly, meeting her gaze across the dim bridge, his eyes conveying the unshakable trust forged in the fires of a dozen close calls and shared near deaths. It was all they had left in this moment. Trust, raw and unyielding. Voss nodded, punching the sequence with resolve. A muffled whoosh echoed through the ship as the cargo bay doors cracked open to the void, spewing a chaotic mix of crates, frozen vapor, and loose equipment into the black. The debris cloud bloomed behind them like an artificial nebula, a temporary veil that diffused sensor readings and obscured their thermal signature from the Zorath pursuit. From engineering, Ren whooped in triumph as the railgun capacitors hummed to life, their deep thrum vibrating up through the deck plates. Locked and loaded down here? Firing on your mark, Cap. The view screen captured the enemy formation tightening, the Zorath ship's hulls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that traced patterns of energy flow. A grotesque display of their vaunted evolutionary superiority, or so their endless propaganda claimed. Thorn's lip curled in disdain. Let them boast about their perfect forms. Humans didn't evolve to conquer the stars with grace. They clawed their way there, one bloody step at a time. Mark, he ordered, his voice a whip-crack of command. The Endeavor shuddered as the railguns spat their kinetic slugs, silent streaks vanishing into the infinite black. One connected solidly, punching through the lead Zorath ship's dorsal fin with a bloom of shattered alloy and venting gases, the impact visible as a brief flare against the void. The alien vessel veered wildly off course, its plasma fire going erratic, sprays of energy lancing harmlessly into the asteroid field. But triumph was fleeting, as always in this war. A secondary Zorath ship peeled off from the pack, closing fast with predatory intent, its weapons arrays charging with an ominous glow that lit the bridge in eerie hues. Voss's console lit up with fresh warnings, her voice tight. Incoming torpedo, evasive maneuvers now. Thorn braced as Ren slammed the auxiliary controls from engineering, the ship twisting into a desperate barrel roll that tested every structural integrity warning. The torpedo detonated perilously close, the shockwave rattling their frame like a giant's fist and shearing off another sensor array in a cascade of sparks and debris. Darkness crept in from the edges of the view screen as backup systems strained to compensate. Shields at 30%, Voss reported, her tone edged with the fatigue of endless recalibrations. We're not going to make the heart of the field at this rate. The damage is compounding. Thorn rose from his seat, ignoring the pull of inertia that clawed at his body, his stance defiant against the encroaching despair. The cost was mounting, all right. Sensors crippled, supplies venting into the void, crew pushed to the brink of exhaustion. But surrender wasn't etched into human blood. It was something they refused, time and again. Plot a course through the narrow gap dead ahead, he commanded. pointing to a treacherous chasm in the asteroid maze visible on the fractured display. We'll use the rocks to slingshot around and gain velocity. It's our only play. Ren's voice crackled back, laced with disbelief. That's suicide, Cap. The gravity shear in there will rip us apart like paper. Better than letting them pick us off one by one, Thorn replied, his resolve steeling the bridge crew. Humanity's survived worse odds than this. Let's show these evolved pricks what real extinction looks like, from our side. The Endeavor plunged forward into the storm, engines roaring their defiance as the asteroid field closed in like the jaws of some ancient beast. The Endeavor shuddered violently as it dove into the narrow gap, the asteroid field's jagged teeth seeming to clamp down like a vice around the fragile human vessel. Alarms blared throughout the bridge, red lights pulsing across consoles and bulkheads like a frantic heartbeat, casting the crew in bloody hues. Thorn gripped the command rail with white-knuckled hands, his body braced against the relentless G-forces, watching the main view screen fragment into a chaotic mosaic of tumbling rock and swirling debris. The proximity sensors screamed warnings, each near miss a heartbeat away from catastrophe. Gravity fluctuations spiking off the charts. Voss shouted from her station, her fingers flying over the console in a blur as she adjusted thrusters to counter the unpredictable pulls. We're catching too much gravitational drag, rerouting power to stabilize, but it's fighting us every step. Ren braced against his chair in the engineering alcove, his face pale but set in determination, the flickering lights reflecting the sweat on his brow. Captain, this isn't a slingshot anymore. It's a blender. One wrong nudge from these rocks and we're reduced to paste scattered across the field. Thorn didn't flinch, his voice an anchor in the storm. Keep her steady, both of you. We've got momentum building on our side, punch it forward. Full burn on the mains. The ship groaned in protest, hull plates creaking under the immense strain as the engines flared hotter, pushing them deeper into the maelstrom. A fist-sized chunk of ice slammed into the forward shields with a resonant thud, sending sparks erupting across the display panels and jolting the crew in their harnesses. Voss cursed under her breath, a rare slip of frustration from her usually composed demeanor, as she rerouted power from life support to reinforce the faltering barriers. The cabin air grew noticeably cooler, the recyclers whining in overdrive to compensate for the diverted energy, a chill that seeped into bones already weary from the fight. Outside the viewport, the Zorath pursuit craft, sleek iridescent hunters from their relentless fleet, hovered at the gap's edge, their superior sensors mapping every twist and turn with cold precision. Thorn could almost hear their smug transmissions filtering through the intercepted channels, boasting of their evolutionary perfection, of how primitives like humans were doomed relics in a galaxy that had moved beyond such crude struggles. But he knew better. Evolution favored the adaptable, not the arrogant overlords who rested on their laurels. Humans had forged empires from nothing. This was merely another forge. They're flanking us on both sides, Ren reported sharply, his voice cutting through the alarms as he tracked the blips on his auxiliary display. 2 on port, 1 coming up starboard. If they coordinate a firing solution now, we're done. A plasma bolt lanced through the narrow passage from the starboard flanker, grazing the Endeavor's flank with searing heat that made the deck buck like a wild animal. Thorn was thrown against the rail, the impact jarring his shoulder while smoke filled the bridge from a sparking panel, its acrid bite stinging eyes and lungs. Direct hit on the auxiliary drive! Voss yelled over the roar, her hands a whirlwind on the controls. We're losing speed down to 40% and dropping fast. Compensating, but it's not enough. Thorn pushed off the rail, staggering to his feet amid the tilting deck, the plan already fraying at the edges as the slingshot maneuver turned into a desperate scrape for survival. He slammed the intercom button, his voice urgent. Engineering, this is the bridge. Give me everything you've got down there. Overload the mains if you have to. I don't care about the aftermath. From below, Chief Ramirez's voice crackled back through the static, laced with the grit of a man who'd seen too many engines pushed to breaking. On it, Cap. But if we push too hard, those engines are going to melt down around us, literally. Do it anyway. Thorn turned to Ren, his mind demanding options even as chaos reigned. What else can we do? Talk to me. Ren scanned the readouts frantically, sweat beading on his forehead as he plotted trajectories amid the glitches. The field's getting denser ahead. We could use the debris cloud for cover, dive into the thick of it. But it'll blind our own sensors too. Navigating blind in this mess, we're gambling with our lives. Better than being sitting ducks out here. Thorn nodded decisively. Take us in, Voss. Sink the shields to match the debris pattern. Make us a ghost in the storm, indistinguishable from the rocks. The ship lurched as Ramirez's team unleashed the overload from engineering, the engines flaring blue-hot against the void, a desperate surge of power that propelled them forward. The Endeavor weaved through a hail of fragments that pinged off the hull like automatic gunfire, each impact a reminder of their vulnerability. One larger boulder clipped the starboard wing with a grinding screech, shearing away a maneuvering fin in a burst of twisted metal and venting sparks. The bridge tilted wildly, gravity compensators lagging behind the sudden shift, throwing unsecured tools skittering across the floor. Fins gone, Voss reported, her tone edged with mounting fatigue as she fought to stabilize the yaw. Maneuverability down to 30%. And the Zorath are closing. Estimated time to intercept 2 minutes. Thorn's mind raced, drawing on fragments of old Academy drills and the tall tales of veteran spacers who'd survived worse. The aliens thought their symbiotic tech made them invincible, evolved beyond the crude risks of physical combat. But humans? They'd clawed their way through ice ages and starless voids with nothing but stubborn will, and whatever tools lay at hand. This was no different, a test of endurance. Reverse polarity on the forward emitters, he ordered suddenly, the idea crystallizing in the heat of desperation. Turn them into a debris magnet, pull the rocks toward us, but angle it to shield the engines from direct fire. Ren blinked in surprise, then grinned fiercely despite the chaos swirling around them, his engineer's mind appreciating the audacity. Crazy as hell, Captain. But if it works, it'll slingshot that junk right back at them, give them a taste of their own adaptive medicine. Voss hesitated for a split second, running the calculations, then complied with a nod. Polarity flipping now. Everyone brace for impact, this is going to get rough. The emitters hummed to life with a low thrum, invisible gravitational fields yanking a swarm of asteroids into a makeshift barrier that cocooned the Endeavor like rocky armor. The ship plowed through the improvised shield, the debris rattling against the hull in a deafening cacophony, while behind them, the Zorath craft fired wildly, their plasma bolts scattering harmlessly off the churning mass. One hunter veered too close in pursuit, caught in the gravitational snag and crumpled against a spinning boulder with a silent bloom of fire and debris, its iridescent hull fracturing like fragile glass. Got one, Ren whooped, pumping a fist in brief elation, the small victory a spark amid the gloom, but triumph was short-lived as the strain tore at the ship. A deep, ominous groan echoing from the core as a stress fracture spiderwebbed across the hull plating, warning claxons wailing in protest. Voss's console lit up with a cascade of critical failures, her face paling as she read them off. Multiple breaches on decks 3 and 4, she said, her voice hollow with the weight of the news. We can't hold this configuration much longer. The structure's starting to give. Thorn stared at the view screen, the gap narrowing to a pinpoint ahead, the slingshot's velocity building but carving them hollow with every jolt. Supplies were leaking, crew sections exposed to the cold and the aliens regrouping for the killing blow, yet his resolve held firm. Hold course, he said, his tone resolute, a captain's unyielding anchor. We're not extinct yet, not by a long shot. Thorn's grip on the armrests tightened as the gravitational field ripped another massive chunk from the asteroid belt. Debris now hailing against the hull like relentless drumfire on a tin roof, each impact a jarring reminder of their precarious fragility. Ren's fingers flew over her console in the navigation station, rerouting power from non-essentials in a frantic bid to stabilize. The lights flickered briefly as life support dipped, but she cursed under her breath and coaxed it back online with a manual override. Shields critical at 20%. Voss reported from her position, her eyes locked on the readouts, sweat beading on her forehead as the cabin's recycled air turned stale and heavy, carrying the faint ozone tang of failing systems. If we push the engines any harder, we'll melt the coils. Permanent damage, sir. Thorn nodded grimly, his jaw set like forged steel. The Zorath hunters were closing in again, their sleek forms weaving through the chaos of the field like predators navigating a storm-swept sea, undeterred by the losses. One fired a plasma lance that grazed their flank, scoring a black, molten scar across the viewports that made the stars warp momentarily. The ship lurched in response, fresh alarms blaring their discordant symphony. Evade to the left, Hard, Thorn barked, his command instinctive. Ren, give me everything on the maneuvering thrusters, don't hold back. She complied without question, the deck tilting sharply as the thrusters fired in a burst, the G-forces pressing them into their seats like an invisible hand. Voss braced against her station, muttering rapid calculations aloud to fine-tune the trajectory, her voice a steady counterpoint to the chaos. Trajectory's off by 3 degrees at this rate, she warned, her brow furrowed in concentration. We'll clip the next rock cluster instead of slingshotting clean through. It's too unstable. The view screen showed it clearly. A massive boulder, tumbling end over end in the near distance, its surface pitted and unforgiving. A silent harbinger of doom spinning toward them. Thorn's mind raced through the options, the aliens' boasts echoing in his thoughts. Their evolutionary pinnacle of symbiotic hives and perfect adaptations, free of wasteful emotions or errors. But humans? We'd jury-rigged our way out of caves, and across planetary oceans with nothing but curiosity and grit. This asteroid blender was no different. It was just the Void's latest challenge. Override the safety protocols on the engines, he decided, his voice cutting through the noise. Vent the auxiliary tanks to boost thrust. It'll burn hot and dirty, but it'll get us through the gap. Voss shot him a sharp look, her cautious instincts flaring at the recklessness. That'll flood the corridors with plasma residue, Captain. Decks 2 through 5 go toxic in minutes. The crew there won't have time to suit up. Do it, Thorn replied, his tone brooking no argument, steel beneath the calm. Or we don't make the gap at all. It's our lives or the ship, and I choose fighting another day. Ren hit the command from her station, and the ship groaned in deep protest, a hiss echoing through the vents as the auxiliary tanks vented their volatile contents into the main drive. The acrid tang of overheating alloys permeated the air, sharp and biting as they surged forward, the boulder now filling the screen like a looming apocalypse. The lead Zorath hunter matched their speed with eerie precision, its weapons charging, with an ominous glow that bathed the bridge in predatory light. They're locking on weapons, Ren warned, her voice tight. Brace for impact, here it comes. The plasma bolt struck true, slamming into their weakened shields with devastating force. Sparks erupted from consoles across the bridge, and Voss yelped as her panel shorted out, flames licking at the edges of the interface. She slapped a fire suppressor onto it with quick reflexes, coughing through the thickening smoke that clawed at her throat. Shields are down completely, she gasped, waving away the haze. Hull integrity at 48% and falling, multiple micro-breaches forming. Thorn unstrapped from his chair in a fluid motion, grabbing a manual override lever from the bulkhead to wrestle direct control, the ship now veering wildly as the slingshot path fractured under the cumulative damage. He could see the Zorath, formation tightening on the tactical display, their broadcasts taunting through the comms. Evolutionary superiors closing the net on primitives, their arrogance a palpable wave. Not today, Thorn thought, resolve hardening. Ren, sink the grav field to the thrusters, pulse it like a whip to crack that boulder in half. We'll ride the fragments out and scatter their pursuit. Her eyes widened at the audacity, but she didn't hesitate, her engineer's ingenuity kicking in. You're insane, Captain. But yeah, that could work if the timing's perfect. The pulse fired with a deep thrum, the gravitational snag lashing out like a cosmic flail. The boulder split with a silent crack visible on the screens, shards exploding, outward in a deadly spray that filled the void with lethal shrapnel. The Zorath scattered in disarray, one vessel pulverized mid-maneuver by the debris wave, its wreckage blooming like a fleeting flower in the black. The Endeavor threaded the needle through the chaos, caught in the debris wake, acceleration, pinning Thorn back into his seat as the world blurred into streaks of rock and distant starlight. Voss monitored the toxic spread from the vents, sealing bulkheads one by one with steady hands despite the fresh burn blooming on her arm from the shorted panel. We're through the worst, she breathed, slumping slightly in relief. Velocity holding at escape threshold, barely. But as the asteroid belt began to recede into the distance, Thorn spotted the persistent threat on the scopes. A lone hunter had survived the blast, trailing them with relentless precision. Its hull was scarred and venting faintly, but its weapons hummed back to life, undeterred. The chase wasn't over. They were alive, but the aliens' pride demanded blood, and the void stretched endlessly ahead, unforgiving and patient. Thorn's grip tightened further on the controls. Extinction? They'd have to earn it the hard way. Thorn wrenched the controls with a grunt, banking the ship hard into a spiraling spin that threw fresh sparks from the overburdened console, the frame creaking under the strain. The surviving Zorath hunter's first plasma bolt grazed their aft shields, the impact shuddering through the hull like a thunderclap that rattled loose fittings and sent a vibration deep into the bones. Alarms wailed in shrill protest, red lights pulsing across the bridge in a relentless strobe. Shields holding at 40%. Ren snapped from her station, her fingers flying over the navigation console as she plotted micro-adjustments to their vector. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her voice stayed level, edged with that quiet steel Thorn had come to rely on in the darkest hours. It's matching our vector perfectly, faster than it should be after the beating we gave it back there. Voss cursed under her breath from the engineering alcove where she patched a flickering readout with hasty welds, the burn on her arm weeping fluid through the hasty bandage she'd applied earlier. She ignored the pain, rerouting power with grim efficiency, her witty edge dulled by the creeping fatigue. That hunter's got redundant drives, sir. Ours are limping at best. If we push any harder, we'll fry the engines for good. Thorn didn't look back, his jaw set in determination, eyes locked on the tactical display where the hunter loomed as a jagged silhouette, inexorably closing the gap with mechanical precision. The asteroid belt's remnants streaked past the viewports now, useless for further cover, leaving them exposed in the open void, a raw, vulnerable stretch of space where there was nowhere left to hide. Options? He demanded, his voice brooking no delay. We can't outrun it forever, it's too persistent. Ren's screens flickered as she plotted potential trajectories, her cautious nature warring with the raw urgency of the pursuit. She was always the one double-checking angles and probabilities, but the hunter's relentless approach stripped away any room for hesitation. Slingshot maneuver around that gas giant coming up on our bow. We use its gravity well to whip us out of their line of fire, maybe shake the tail for good. But the window's tight, one miscalculation in the periapsis, and we're paste smeared across the atmosphere. Voss leaned in from her alcove, her fatigue evident in the shadows under her eyes, but her mind still sharp. Or we vent plasma from the rear thrusters to fake an overload, make it look like we're blowing out critically. Draw the bastard in, close, then flip the ship and ram it with the forward batteries. Risky as hell, but it could crack that scarred hull wide open. Thorn weighed the proposals in an instant, the ship's hum vibrating through his bones like a warning pulse, the weight of command pressing down. The Zorath had boasted endlessly of their evolutionary pinnacle, adaptable, relentless predators forged in a cradle of cosmic wars, their ships extensions of their very biology. But humans? We'd clawed survival from dying worlds and barren rocks, turning scraps of metal and code into weapons when empires fell. No grand designs or perfect symmetries, just pure, unfiltered grit. Voss, prep the plasma vent and make it convincing, he decided, blending the ideas into a hybrid gambit. Ren, line up the slingshot trajectory around the giant. We'll improvise on the fly. Feint first, then sling. The hunter fired again, its plasma bolt searing past close enough to heat the viewport glass, the faint sizzle audible through the hull. Thorn jinked the ship to starboard, the G-forces pinning the crew against their harnesses, a momentary disorientation that cleared as Voss sealed the vent protocols, her hands blurring over the controls. Vents ready to blow, she confirmed. It'll look like we're in full catastrophic failure. Give it a second to bite. And then we flip. The gas giant swelled on the main screen, its swirling bands of orange and rust a deceptive calm masking turbulent storms that could swallow ships whole. 3 minutes to periapsis, Ren announced, her plot locked in with precision. Hold on tight. This is going to pull like nothing else. Thorn accelerated, the Endeavor groaning under the strain as the engines strained against their limits. The hunter surged forward in response, sensing weakness in the feigned distress, its weapons charging with a predatory whine that echoed through the comm scan, a digital snarl of anticipation. Pride drove the Zorath. They didn't retreat from prey. They eradicated it utterly. But Thorn spotted the subtle pattern in its approach, precise and efficient but predictable, evolved for dominance in open battles, not the desperate improvisations of cornered humans. "Vent now," he ordered, his timing honed by instinct. Voss hit the switch and a plume of superheated plasma erupted from their stern, blooming into the void like a distress flare, the signature screaming critical failure to any scanner. The hunter dove in eagerly, its weapons priming for the kill shot, sensors fooled by the illusion of a crippled foe ripe for the taking. Ren's voice cut sharp over the rising alarms. "It's committed," closing fast right into the trap. Thorn spun the ship in a tight corkscrew inversion, the maneuver testing every rivet and weld as inertia clawed at the frame. The gas giant's immense gravity yanked them sideways like a giant's indifferent hand, shearing their path into a wild arc. Mid-flip, Voss fired the forward batteries, the energy bursts lancing out in a wild arcing salvo. One struck true, punching through the hunter's underbelly where the earlier damage had left it vulnerable. Secondary explosions rippling along its frame like chain lightning. The alien vessel bucked violently, trailing fire, but it didn't go down clean. A final, desperate volley from its dying systems clipped the Endeavor's wing, shearing off more sensors and venting atmosphere from a secondary hull breach in a hiss of escaping air. "We're hit again," Ren reported urgently, her caution flaring into swift action as she slammed emergency seals on the breach. The spin wobbled uncontrollably for a moment, controls turning sluggish under the fresh damage. Voss scrambled back to her alcove, barking into her comm to the engine room. "Breach contained for now, but we've lost the lateral thrusters. That was too damn close, another inch, and we're venting the bridge." Thorn nursed the ship out of the giant's crushing grasp with careful inputs, watching the hunter's wreckage tumble into the roiling atmosphere below, a fiery streak swallowed by the clouds in a final silent plunge. They were clear for the moment, but the cost lingered like a shadow, power reserves teetering on critical, Voss's burn worsening from the jolt and exertion, and Ren's navigation plots glitching from the sensor losses. He exhaled slowly, his grip easing on the controls for the first time in what felt like hours. The void stretched ahead, endless and unforgiving, a canvas of stars indifferent to their struggle. Survival wasn't some gift of evolution. It was earned scar by scar in the unyielding dark. Thorn's hands hovered over the console, fingers tracing the flickering readouts as if he could will them into steadiness, coax life from the dying displays. The ship's hum had deepened into a laborious groan, each pulse from the engine sending a bone-rattling vibration through the deck that set his teeth on edge. Ren leaned over her station, her brow furrowed in that familiar knot of intense concentration, patching what she could into the navigation system with makeshift bypasses and salvaged wiring. "These glitches are starting to cascade," she said, her voice tight but even, betraying none of the fear gnawing at the edges. "If we push straight for the relay station like this, we might lose plotting capability entirely before we even get in range." Voss grunted from the engineering alcove, his bandaged arm slung awkwardly across his chest as he wrestled with a jury-rigged panel, sparks flying as he forced connections. The burn from the earlier jolt had swollen beneath the wrap, turning the skin a mottled red, but he didn't complain, just worked methodically, sweat beading on his forehead like dew on an overheated wire, dripping into his eyes. "Power's holding steady at 30%, he reported, slamming the panel shut with his good hand. "Barely scraping by. One more hit like that last one and we're just another cloud of space debris drifting aimlessly." Thorn nodded, his eyes fixed on the starfield ahead, where the trail of the destroyed hunter had faded into the infinite black, leaving only faint echoes on the sensors. The immediate threat was gone, but its kin wouldn't be far behind. The fringe colony reports painted the Zorath as relentless hunters, their ships grown from bioengineered hulls that self-repaired faster than human weapons could inflict lasting damage. They called themselves evolution's darlings, superior in firepower, speed, and adaptation, superior in every metric except the one that truly mattered: raw survival against the galaxy's unforgiving unknowns. "We can't afford to drift out here exposed," Thorn said, banking the ship slightly to test the remaining thrusters, the sluggish yaw confirming Voss's grim assessment. "The relay station is our best shot at this point. Signal for emergency pickup, patch the hull where we can, and ghost out before they circle back with reinforcements." Ren's fingers danced across her screen, pulling up a holographic map of nearby Allied positions that stuttered into shaky focus, the power fluctuations causing distortions. Pinpricks of light marked scattered human outposts and relays, But the nearest one blinked erratically, half obscured by swirling ion storms that crackled across the display like electromagnetic lightning. "It's a gamble either way," she said, trailing off as she let the implications hang heavy in the air. "Those storms could fry our comms array mid-transmission, leave us screaming into the void unheard. And if the Zorath are monitoring our frequencies like we think—" She didn't finish, but the unspoken hung there. They'd already lost 2 scout ships to similar traps. Distress signals turned into bait that drew larger packs swarming in. Voss slammed the panel shut with a resounding clang, eliciting a fresh spark that made him curse vividly under his breath. The pain in his arm flaring but ignored. "Then we improvise like always. I've got spare conduits scavenged from the secondary bay. If I reroute the auxiliary power through the outer hull plating, we might boost the signal strength without drawing too much heat. But it'll mean venting excess heat directly from the core. Could cook us alive in here if it backfires and the temperature spikes." Thorn considered it for a long moment, the weight of command settling over him like an old, familiar harness, chafing but necessary. He'd flown cargo runs before the war, hauling raw ore between asteroid rocks and frontier ports, back when the biggest threat was pirates or engine failure. But this crew, this fragile knot of humanity adrift in the black, was his responsibility now, bound by shared trials. Wren's caution had saved them from the initial ambush with her precise plotting. Voss's grit had sealed the breach and kept the engines coughing along. His own steady hands had threaded the needle out of that gravitational hell. Together they were more than the sum of their failing parts. They were a unit forged in fire. "Do it," he decided, his voice firm. "Wren, plot a micro-jump to skirt the edge of the ion storm. Keep us nimble and out of the worst interference. We'll boost the signal and pray it punches through." The ship shuddered as Voss initiated the reroute, conduits humming to life throughout the hull with a metallic whine that built to a crescendo. Wren's holographic map stabilized for a precious moment, then warped dramatically as the power surge hit, lines of data twisting like storm clouds. Alarms blared in short, insistent bursts, warning tones of impending overload that set nerves on edge. "It's spiking hard," Wren called out, her voice rising just a fraction, enough to betray the fear she usually buried deep under layers of calculation. Thorn gripped the yoke tightly, fighting the sudden torque that spun them portside without warning. Stars wheeling across the viewport in a dizzying blur that threatened to induce nausea. Voss barked rapid adjustments into his comm link to the engine room team, his words clipped and urgent. "Diverting the flow now. Hold her steady, Thorn." But the burn in his arm flared with the effort, slowing his reach for the manual override switch just enough to make the moment stretch. A panel sparked again, hotter and more volatile this time, flames licking at the edges before Voss smothered them, and the ship's lights dimmed to the stark emergency reds that painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. They stabilized mere inches from total disaster, the micro-jump engines firing just enough to sling them toward the relay's coordinates, the course correction a hair's breadth from collision with a drifting fragment. Wren exhaled shakily, slumping back in her chair for a brief respite. "Distress signal's going out now. It's weak, but it's broadcasting on all emergency bands. Fingers crossed someone hears it through the noise." Voss slumped against the bulkhead, cradling his injured arm as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving only exhaustion. "That'll cost us dearly. Core temperatures climbing fast. Won't hold for another hour without a proper cooldown. And that's if nothing else goes wrong." The relay station loomed into view on the scopes, a skeletal framework of human-engineered antennae and girders orbiting a bloated gas giant, its arrays glinting like skeletal fingers against the swirling clouds below, a beacon of fragile hope in the void. But as Thorn aligned their approach vector, carefully nursing the damaged ship, a new blip appeared on the tactical scopes, faint at first, but closing with purpose. Not random debris or a sensor ghost, a shadow in the black bioluminescent trails flickering to life as it accelerated. The Zorath had traced their echo, drawn by the signal like sharks to blood. "They're here," Wren whispered, her caution sharpening into cold resolve as she confirmed the contacts. "2 signatures flanking us from the storm's edge, closing fast." Thorn's jaw set like iron. No room for retreat this time. The relay was either salvation or a final grave. "Arm the point defense turrets, get them hot. Voss, whatever you've got left in the tanks, give me thrust on those mains." He punched the engines manually, the Endeavor lurching forward with a protesting roar that shook the bridge. The Zorath ships detached from the ion storm's cover, uncoiling like predators emerging from underbrush, their hulls pulsing with organic light that traced veins of energy across iridescent surfaces. Lasers lanced out first, grazing the shields and sending cascades of static across the consoles, disrupting readouts in bursts of white noise. Thorn weaved the ship on instinct, drawing on years of honed reflexes from 1,000 tight spots in his career. But the damaged thrusters lagged, turning what should have been fluid evasion into a desperate stuttering dance. Ren targeted the lead ship with the turrets, her shots precise but underpowered from the drained capacitors, scoring superficial hits that barely scorched the alien armor, leaving faint trails of vapor. "They're adapting already," she said, frustration edging her tone as she adjusted firing solutions. "Shields modulating to our frequency. Our bursts are barely tickling them now." Voss, ignoring the pain shooting up his arm like fire, dragged himself to the weapons auxiliary station, his movements deliberate despite the haze of agony. Not for long. He patched in the overheating core's excess energy, channeling it into a makeshift pulse burst, the systems whining in overload. The ship bucked as the weapon fired, a raw lance of plasma tearing from the forward arrays and punching through the flankers' defenses with a brilliant flash. One Zorath craft veered off course, trailing vapor and debris. But the second pressed closer with unyielding aggression, its boarding tendrils extending like grasping vines, probing for weak points in the hull. Alarms screamed through the bridge, hull integrity dropping as the tendrils latched tentatively, testing seals. Thorn rolled the ship hard, clipping one tendril with a wing and a grinding impact that jarred them all, sparks flying from the contact point. Thorn gripped the controls even tighter, his knuckles blanching white against the vibrating yoke as the ship shuddered from the collision. Fresh sparks erupting from the console where the clipped tendrils' corrosive residue began eating into the wing plating like acid. "Hold her steady, damn it," he barked, banking hard to evade the second Zorath craft's renewed pursuit, the alien vessel twisting with unnatural agility to match their faltering moves. Ren braced against her station, rerouting what scraps of power remained from life support to the thrusters, the air in the bridge growing stale and thin as the recyclers whined in protest, struggling to keep oxygen levels viable. "Voss, that pulse you just jury-rigged, it's draining everything we've got left. We won't last another full pass at this rate." The core's redlining. Voss slumped into the auxiliary seat, his arm bandaged crudely with a torn strip from his uniform sleeve, blood seeping through the fabric in dark blooms. He waved off her concern with his good hand, fingers already flying over the patched panel to stabilize the flow. "Better drained than dead and floating, Ren. Give me 30 seconds to lock down the core, keep them off us that long." Sweat poured down his forehead, the overheating reactor's hum rising to a feverish pitch behind the bulkhead, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. The alien ship loomed large on the view screen, its hull a sleek mosaic of iridescent scales that shifted colors like living camouflage, adapting to the starlight and debris shadows. It fired a probing energy beam that grazed the shields, sending jolts through the deck plating that Thorn felt in his teeth, a buzzing vibration that set his nerves alight. These Zorath weren't just technologically advanced, they evolved in real time, their systems morphing to counter every human trick and tactic with horrifying efficiency. But humans broke things until they worked again, no matter how many times they had to improvise. "They're locking on tractor beams," Ren reported, her voice steady despite the flicker of fear in her eyes. She was the cautious one, always calculating the odds to the decimal, but now her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd run out of safe plays entirely. "If they get a solid grip and board us, we're done. No time for drawn-out heroics. We need to shake them now." Thorn's mind raced through the tactical overlay, spotting the asteroid remnants from an old mining operation looming ahead. Jagged rocks tumbling in lazy orbits, a debris field ripe for exploitation. A plan sparked in his thoughts, raw and reckless, but born of necessity. "Voss, can you spike the engines for one more overload?" "Give us a slingshot burst to dive into that debris?" he asked, already angling the nose toward the field. Voss glanced up from his work, pain etching deep lines around his eyes, but his engineer's grit shining through. He was the fixer, the one who made the broken whole again. "Yeah, I can do it, but it'll fry the injectors permanently. We might not be able to stop after. Coasting on momentum only." "Do it," Thorn ordered, committing without hesitation. He angled the ship toward the densest cluster of rocks, the Endeavor protesting every twist with creaks and groans. Wren shot him a look, her witty edge surfacing even amid the peril, a brief spark of levity. Great, straight into the blender. Because space wasn't hazardous enough already, right? The Zorath craft matched their vector effortlessly, its tendrils retracting as it prepared another volley of beams. The air on the bridge thickening with tension, Thorn wove through the first boulders, proximity alerts blaring like sirens, the ship dodging by margins measured in centimeters. A fist-sized chunk of ore pinged off the hull, crumpling a secondary sensor array in a shower of sparks that made Voss curse vividly, slamming a fist on his console in frustration. The core surged under Voss's command, engines roaring to life with a makeshift fury that shook the frame. Burst in 3, 2, 1, go. He counted, yanking the override lever with his uninjured arm. The Endeavor lurched forward like a beast unleashed, acceleration pinning them to their seats with crushing force. G-forces clawing at the edges of Thorn's vision until stars danced in black spots. He held the course steady, slingshotting around a massive asteroid that dwarfed them, its gravity well yanking them into a tight arc. The alien followed too closely, its beam slicing through a nearby rock instead of the ship, the explosion of debris blooming outward in a lethal spray that peppered both vessels indiscriminately. The Zorath shields flared brightly, absorbing the brunt, but one jagged fragment, propelled by the burst's momentum, tore into its underbelly with a visible gash, venting atmosphere in a silent plume that trailed like ghostly fingers. Thorn pulled up sharply, the overloaded engines sputtering and coughing as they cleared the field, putting precious distance between them and the wounded foe, its pursuit faltering as systems failed. But the victory tasted bitter on his tongue. The gauges showed the core teetering on critical, and Voss's face had gone ashen, the pain finally overtaking his endurance. Wren exhaled heavily, checking the crew vitals on a side monitor. One down, but we're limping bad now. That arm of yours, Voss, let me take a proper look. You're no good to us passing out. He shook his head stubbornly, forcing a grin through the grimace. Save the mothering for the med bay, Wren. We've got more of them inbound. Scanners are picking up echoes from the fleet. Thorn scanned the scopes himself, confirming the distant signatures. The main Zorath fleet hovering at the system's edge, their superior evolution, broadcasted in mocking signals that filtered through the comms like static taunts. But humanity's response was simple, etched into every survivor's soul. Endure, adapt, break through no matter the cost. As the ship stabilized into a ragged orbit around the debris field, Thorn set coordinates for the nearest colony relay. The path ahead fraught but necessary. The cost was already mounting, fuel reserves critical, hull breached in multiple places, but they flew on, defiant sparks flickering in the vast, uncaring void. Thorn gripped the console as the ship's alarms wailed once more. Red lights pulsing across the bridge like arterial blood spilling from a wound. The urgency palpable in every flicker. The colony relay station loomed large on the view screen now. A skeletal lattice of human-made antennae and reinforced girders twisting through the asteroid field's outer fringes. A testament to ingenuity amid desolation. Relay and weapons range, he barked, his fingers dancing over the controls to align their approach. But those Zorath bastards are closing fast, 3 signatures now, gaining velocity on an intercept course. Wren shot Voss a quick glance, her hands steady on the auxiliary thrusters despite the sweat beading on her forehead and trickling down her temple. Voss slumped in the co-pilot's seat, his injured arm cradled protectively against his chest, the makeshift bandage from their last skirmish already darkening with fresh blood seeping through. Don't baby me, Wren, he muttered through gritted teeth, meeting her eyes with a spark of defiance. Just patch us into that relay before they turn us into scrap metal. She nodded curtly, diverting the last dregs of power from life support to the comms array, the bridge air growing noticeably thinner as the recyclers labored. The engines deepened into a ragged growl that vibrated through the deck plates, a weary beast pushed beyond limits. Static crackled harshly in her earpiece as the relay's signal finally locked on, but it wasn't a clean connection. The interference from the Zorath jamming waves warped the feed, turning the colony's response into a garbled, urgent plea that broke through in fragments. "This is Outpost Epsilon," a voice managed to clarify amid the noise, faint but laced with desperation. "We read your distress signal. Hangar Bay is prepped for docking, but we've got incoming reports of Zorath activity. The ship lurched suddenly, cutting off the transmission. Thorn cursed under his breath, yanking the yoke to starboard as an alien probe slipped through their frayed defenses, its sleek form darting like a predator fish through the void. Agile and unseen until too late, it fired a glancing energy shot, the impact shearing off a dorsal sensor array in a burst of sparks that showered the bridge, eliciting winces from the crew. "Evasive, now," Thorn commanded. "Ren, reroute auxiliary power to the shields, bolster what we can." She complied instantly, her mind racing through the schematics like a digital ghost, prioritizing flows amid the chaos. The core was holding, but only barely. Every jolt sent fresh pain lancing across Voss's face, though he gritted his teeth and leaned forward to scan the tactical overlay, his good hand steady on the controls. "That probe's just scouting for the main fleet," he said, voice rough. "If it gets a solid tag on us, the whole swarm will dive in like sharks. Thorn, can we spoof their sensors? Make our signature look like just another piece of debris in the field?" Thorn's eyes narrowed, the idea igniting in the dim, smoke-hazed light of the bridge. Debris, that was the key. The asteroid field was thick with it. Chunks of rock, twisted metal from some long-forgotten mining operation, all tumbling in silent chaos. "Risky, but it's our best play," he agreed. "Ren, vent the forward cargo bays. Dump every scrap we scavenged from that last wreck we passed. Make a cloud around us." Her fingers flew across the panel, seals hissing open as non-essential cargo ejected into space, twisted hull fragments, empty fuel cells. Even the spare parts they'd hoarded for emergency repairs, all spewed forth in a chaotic plume. The ship shuddered with the shift in momentum, the junk cloud blooming around them like an artificial fog, diffusing their thermal and electromagnetic signatures. On the scopes, their blip blurred and merged with the field's clutter, becoming just another indistinct echo amid the debris. The probe hesitated, its scan pinging erratically as it probed the cloud, before peeling off toward a larger rock cluster, deceived by the ruse. Voss exhaled in relief, slumping back slightly but keeping his eyes on the readouts. "Clever move, Cap, bought us some breathing room." But his voice carried an undercurrent of strain, the pain etching deeper lines around his eyes. Ren reached over briefly, adjusting his sling with a firm, no-nonsense touch. "Breathing room's all we've got right now. The relay's hailing us again. Signal's clearer this time, punching through the junk." The voice from Epsilon cut in sharper, urgency sharpening the tone. "Human vessel. Endeavor. You're cleared for final approach and docking. But listen close. The Zorath hit our outer defenses about an hour ago. They've deployed bioships with adaptive hulls that regenerate faster than we can punch holes in them. We're holding the line for now, but we need whatever you've got. Intel on their weaknesses, spare firepower, anything to tip the scales." Thorn banked the ship toward the relay's glowing docking lights, the asteroid shadows playing across the hull like grasping fingers in the low light, the structure's web of girders resolving into view, human ingenuity etched in every weld, beam and antenna a fragile bastion against the stars. "Copy that, Epsilon," he replied, voice calm over the comm. "We've danced up close with one of their hunters. Weak point is the neural core. Expose it with concentrated fire and they falter, adaptation stalling." Thorn's voice cut through the comms again, urgent with a hint of strain. "I've got a workaround from up here, overloading the grav plates beneath your position. It'll spike the artificial gravity, crush anything with mass over 50 kilos flat. Hang on, it's firing now." The deck lurched suddenly, gravity intensifying in a crushing wave that made every movement laborious. Voss grabbed Ren's arm, pulling her toward a nearby stanchion as the field engaged fully, the air humming with the strain of the generators. The alien staggered under the sudden force, its bulk compressing with audible grinding as plates shifted like tectonic plates in miniature, protesting the unnatural pressure. But even then it adapted, limbs splaying wide to distribute the weight across the deck, tendrils anchoring to walls and conduits for leverage, buying time to evolve countermeasures. "Not enough to finish it," Voss growled, holstering his rifle one-handed and snatching a plasma torch from Ren's toolkit, igniting it with a flick. The blue flame roared to life, casting flickering shadows in the fog. "We go manual. Up close and personal." Ren's eyes widened in alarm, but understanding dawned quickly. She knew the stakes. She tossed him a canister of volatile sealant, originally meant for emergency hull breaches, from her belt. "Mix it with the torch flame. It'll catalyze into something that burns hot enough to melt through their core. Lock the adaptations in place." He caught it deftly with his good hand, ignoring the fresh lance of pain from his shoulder as he positioned for the strike. The alien lunged then, a thick tendril whipping toward him like a barbed lash. Voss ducked low, slashing upward with the torch. The appendage cauterized mid-air, dropping to the deck in a smoking, twitching coil that filled the air with the stench of charred flesh. Thorn's voice chimed in over the comms, edged with the strain of maintaining the overload. Grav fields holding for 30 seconds max. Make it count down there. Voss charged forward, Ren at his flank providing suppression fire with her sidearm, the shots barking sharp in the confined space. He reached the beast's underbelly, where internal scans had pinpointed a nexus of vulnerable neural webs beneath the shifting plates. Puncturing the canister against the torch's base, he plunged the improvised incendiary device into the soft tissue exposed by the grav pressure. Flames erupted in a white-hot inferno, unrelenting and voracious, the sealant fusing with the Zorath's adaptive fluids in a chemical reaction that locked its evolution in stasis. The alien shrieked, a horrific sound like tearing metal amplified through the vents, its body convulsing wildly as the fire spread, biomass charring and cracking. It collapsed under the intensified grav field, a smoldering heap that stank of burnt biomass and defeat, plates fusing into an immobile mass. The deck stabilized with a final shudder, gravity normalizing as Thorn eased off the overload. Voss slumped against the wall, the torch still humming faintly in his grip, his breaths coming in heavy gasps. Ren knelt beside him quickly, checking his arm with efficient hands, peeling back the bandage to assess the damage. That was too close, way too close. They're learning our tricks faster than we can improvise new ones. We can't keep this up forever. From the comms, Thorn's laugh came through, ragged but laced with triumph. One down, but the main breach is widening up here. More inbound, tendrils probing deeper. We adapt or we die, crew. Keep moving. Voss extinguished the torch with a hiss, staring at the alien's remains as they began to dissolve into a viscous slurry, but scars lingered on the deck. Proof that superiority lay not in the speed of evolution, but in humanity's flat refusal to yield no matter the cost. They moved out together, footsteps echoing in the thawing fog of cryogas toward the next point of conflict. The station's corridors alive with the sounds of battle. Voss gripped the railing tightly as the corridor buckled, again under another seismic pulse, from the alien entity burrowing deep in the ship's belly, or what was left of it after the breaches, metal groaning like a wounded animal, under the strain. Ren pulled him forward with urgent determination, her flashlight beam slicing through the dissipating mist of cryogas, revealing jagged fissures spiderwebbing the bulkhead that wept a viscous, glowing fluid, remnants of the creature's dissolving form still twitching faintly. Thorn's voice crackled over the comms, steady but laced with the urgency of command under fire. Breach 2 is venting atmosphere fast. Seal it before we lose the forward bays entirely. Techs are stretched thin up here. They sprinted down the corridor, boots pounding against the grated flooring, Voss's injured arm throbbing with every jarring step, a fire that radiated up his shoulder. The plasma torch felt heavier in his belt now, its fuel gauge flickering low in his peripheral vision, a silent warning. Ren glanced back at him mid-stride, her face etched with the grim focus of someone who'd patched too many hulls under live fire, her eyes sharp. We improvise with what we've got left. That last one's fluids. Could we weaponize the residue? Turn their own biomass against them? Voss nodded, his mind racing ahead even as pain clouded the edges. The Zorath evolved on the fly, shifting their biomass to counter every human tactic with fluid grace. But that adaptability left traces, unstable, reactive sludge that bonded unpredictably with foreign materials, a vulnerability if exploited right. He scooped a glob of the stuff from the floor with his gloved hand as they ran, feeling it squirm like living tar against the fabric, warm and pulsing. Mix it with the emergency foam sealant from the dispensers. It'll catalyze into something corrosive, eat through their outer layers. Thorn, you reading this on the shared channel? Prep the dispenser units in Bay Alpha for deployment. Thorn's response came back laced with static and the distant sounds of weapons fire. On it down here. But hurry. Sensors are showing a full swarm tunneling through the outer hull now. They're burrowing like termites on steroids, adapting to our plating. The corridor widened into the forward junction, where emergency lights pulsed a steady red, casting long shadows that danced like predators across the walls. The air thick with tension. Voss slammed the access panel open with his shoulder, revealing the dispenser unit half buried under fallen debris from the earlier tremors. Ren yanked free a tangle of wires, rerouting power from auxiliary lines while Voss smeared the alien residue into the foam cartridge. The contact immediate and violent, it hissed like acid on flesh, bubbling into a frothy black ooze that began eating through the metal casing with slow, deliberate hunger. "Careful with that," she muttered, steadying his hand as he worked, her voice low. "One wrong mix ratio and we're the ones dissolving from the inside out." He sealed the modified cartridge with a grunt, the device whining to life as power surged through it, ready for deployment. Together they hauled the bulky unit toward the widening breach, a ragged tear in the hull where the void outside clawed hungrily at the air, sucking in loose panels and debris with a relentless, howling gale. Shapes writhed just beyond the gap, elongated forms, iridescent and shifting, probing the edges with tendrils that tested the integrity like fingers exploring a fresh wound, seeking entry. "Fire it up!" Thorne barked from the bridge feed, his voice urgent as auxiliary readouts spiked on their shared display. Voss triggered the dispenser, the modified foam erupting in a high-pressured jet that arced toward the breach. It hit the incoming swarm and ignited, not with open flame but a chain reaction of corrosion. The residue-laced foam bonding to the Zorath biomass and hardening instantly into crystalline spikes that pierced hides and locked limbs in place. Screeches echoed through the comms network. Alien agony translated into distorted frequencies that set Voss's teeth on edge. A sound like nails on hull plating, amplified 1,000-fold. One creature lunged through the gap despite the assault, its body elongating grotesquely to bridge the tear, mandibles snapping at the air with feral hunger. Thorne's voice cut through the comms again, urgent with a hint of strain. "I've got a workaround from up here, overloading the grav plates beneath your position. It'll spike the artificial gravity, crush anything with mass over 50 kilos flat. Hang on, it's firing now." The deck lurched suddenly, gravity intensifying in a crushing wave that made every movement laborious. Voss grabbed Ren's arm, pulling her toward a nearby stanchion as the field engaged fully, the air humming with the strain of the generators. The alien staggered under the sudden force, its bulk compressing with audible grinding as plates shifted like tectonic plates in miniature, protesting the unnatural pressure. But even then it adapted, limbs splaying wide to distribute the weight across the deck, tendrils anchoring to walls and conduits for leverage, buying time to evolve countermeasures. "Not enough to finish it," Voss growled, holstering his rifle one-handed and snatching a plasma torch from Ren's toolkit, igniting it with a flick. The blue flame roared to life, casting flickering shadows in the fog. "We go manual, up close and personal." Ren's eyes widened in alarm, but understanding dawned quickly. She knew the stakes. She tossed him a canister of volatile sealant, originally meant for emergency hull breaches, from her belt. "Mix it with the torch flame. It'll catalyze into something that burns hot enough to melt through their core, lock the adaptations in place." He caught it deftly with his good hand, ignoring the fresh lance of pain from his shoulder as he positioned for the strike. The alien lunged then, a thick tendril whipping toward him like a barbed lash. Voss ducked low, slashing upward with the torch. The appendage cauterized mid-air, dropping to the deck in a smoking, twitching coil that filled the air with the stench of charred flesh. Thorne's voice chimed in over the comms, edged with the strain of maintaining the overload. "Grav fields holding for 30 seconds max. Make it count down there." Voss charged forward, Ren at his flank providing suppression fire with her sidearm, the shots barking sharp in the confined space. He reached the beast's underbelly, where internal scans had pinpointed a nexus of vulnerable neural webs beneath the shifting plates. Puncturing the canister against the torch's base, he plunged the improvised incendiary device into the soft tissue exposed by the grav pressure. Flames erupted in a white-hot inferno, unrelenting and voracious, the sealant fusing with the Zorath's adaptive fluids in a chemical reaction that locked its evolution in stasis. The alien shrieked, a horrific sound like tearing metal amplified through the vents, its body convulsing wildly as the fire spread, biomass charring and cracking. It collapsed under the intensified grav field, a smoldering heap that stank of burnt biomass and defeat, plates fusing into an immobile mass. The deck stabilized with a final shudder, gravity normalizing as Thorne eased off the overload. Voss slumped against the wall, the torch still humming faintly in his grip, his breaths coming in heavy gasps. Ren knelt beside him quickly, checking his arm with efficient hands, peeling back the bandage to assess the damage. That was too close, way too close. They're learning our tricks faster than we can improvise new ones. We can't keep this up forever. From the comms, Thorn's laugh came through, ragged but laced with triumph. One down, but the main breach is widening up here. More inbound, tendrils probing deeper. We adapt or we die, crew. Keep moving. Voss extinguished the torch with a hiss, staring at the aliens' remains as they began to dissolve into a viscous slurry, but scars lingered on the deck, proof that superiority lay not in the speed of evolution, but in humanity's flat refusal to yield no matter the cost. They moved out together, footsteps echoing in the thawing fog of cryogas toward the next point of conflict. The station's corridors alive with the sounds of battle. Voss gripped the railing tightly as the corridor buckled, again under another seismic pulse, from the alien entity burrowing deep in the ship's belly, or what was left of it after the breaches, metal groaning like a wounded animal, under the strain. Wren pulled him forward with urgent determination, her flashlight beam slicing through the dissipating mist of cryogas, revealing jagged fissures spiderwebbing the bulkhead that wept a viscous, glowing fluid, remnants of the creature's dissolving form still twitching faintly. Thorn's voice crackled over the comms, steady but laced with the urgency of command under fire. Breach 2 is venting atmosphere fast. Seal it before we lose the forward bays entirely. Techs are stretched thin up here. They sprinted down the corridor, boots pounding against the grated flooring, Voss's injured arm throbbing with every jarring step, a fire that radiated up his shoulder. The plasma torch felt heavier in his belt now, its fuel gauge flickering low in his peripheral vision, a silent warning. Wren glanced back at him mid-stride, her face etched with the grim focus of someone who'd patched too many holes under live fire, her eyes sharp. We improvise with what we've got left. That last one's fluids. Could we weaponize the residue? Turn their own biomass against them? Voss nodded, his mind racing ahead even as pain clouded the edges. The Zorath evolved on the fly, shifting their biomass to counter every human tactic with fluid grace. But that adaptability left traces, unstable, reactive sludge that bonded unpredictably with foreign materials, a vulnerability if exploited right. He scooped a glob of the stuff from the floor with his gloved hand as they ran, feeling it squirm like living tar against the fabric, warm and pulsing. Mix it with the emergency foam sealant from the dispensers. It'll catalyze into something corrosive, eat through their outer layers. Thorn, you reading this on the shared channel? Prep the dispenser units in Bay Alpha for deployment. Thorn's response came back laced with static and the distant sounds of weapons fire. On it down here. But hurry. Sensors are showing a full swarm tunneling through the outer hull now. They're burrowing like termites on steroids, adapting to our plating. The corridor widened into the forward junction, where emergency lights pulsed a steady red, casting long shadows that danced like predators across the walls. The air thick with tension. Voss slammed the access panel open with his shoulder, revealing the dispenser unit half buried under fallen debris from the earlier tremors. Wren yanked free a tangle of wires, rerouting power from auxiliary lines while Voss smeared the alien residue into the foam cartridge. The contact immediate and violent, it hissed like acid on flesh, bubbling into a frothy black ooze that began eating through the metal casing with slow, deliberate hunger. Careful with that, she muttered, steadying his hand as he worked, her voice low. One wrong mix ratio and we're the ones dissolving from the inside out. He sealed the modified cartridge with a grunt, the device whining to life as power surged through it, ready for deployment. Together they hauled the bulky unit toward the widening breach, a ragged tear in the hull where the void outside clawed hungrily at the air, sucking in loose panels and debris with a relentless, howling gale. Shapes writhed just beyond the gap, elongated forms, iridescent and shifting, probing the edges with tendrils that tested the integrity like fingers exploring a fresh wound, seeking entry. Fire it up! Thorn barked from the bridge feed, his voice urgent as auxiliary readouts spiked on their shared display. Voss triggered the dispenser, the modified foam erupting in a high-pressured jet that arced toward the breach. It hit the incoming swarm and ignited, not with open flame but a chain reaction of corrosion. The residue-laced foam bonding to the Zorath biomass and hardening instantly into crystalline spikes that pierced hides and locked limbs in place. Screeches echoed through the comms network. Alien agony translated into distorted frequencies that set Voss's teeth on edge, a sound like nails on hull plating, amplified 1,000-fold. One creature lunged through the gap despite the assault, its body elongating grotesquely to bridge the tear, mandibles snapping at the air with feral hunger. Ren grabbed a loose strut from the debris, swinging it like a makeshift bat with all her strength. It connected with a wet, resounding crunch against the thing's sensory cluster, buying Voss precious seconds to adjust the foam stream. The corrosive coating spread across the beast, locking its thrashing limbs in rigid poses as the biomass cracked and splintered under the chemical assault. Voss shoved the immobilized form back into the void with a forceful boot, the creature tumbling into the black, trailing globs of its own corrupted essence like a comet's tail. But the dispenser sputtered and died, its fuel depleted in the intense use, the whir fading to silence. More shapes pressed in from the breach, their forms already adapting, shedding outer layers of biomass to slough off the hardening foam, evolving thicker hides in response. Voss's arm burned fiercely, the injury reopening under the recoil of the unit, fresh blood warm against his skin. It's not enough. They're evolving countermeasures already, shrugging it off. Ren's eyes narrowed as she scanned the junction quickly, spotting the access to the grav plates. The grav plates under the deck overload them like before. Pull the swarm in close, then vent the entire section to vacuum. Suck them out. Voss hesitated for a heartbeat, the math flashing through his head. An overload risked collapsing the junction entirely, stranding them from the bridge and main defenses. But retreat wasn't an option, not with the station hanging by a thread. Do it, he agreed, patching the command through to the jury-rigged console with flying fingers. The deck lurched as gravity intensified dramatically, yanking the probing aliens forward in a grotesque pileup of writhing forms. Their bodies piled against the breach, tendrils flailing wildly for purchase on the slick metal. Ren hit the vent sequence without pause, and the air rushed out in a deafening roar, dragging the tangled mass into the vacuum beyond with inexorable force. Voss clung to the console for dear life. Ren's arm locked around his waist as their suits strained against the pull, seals holding just enough to keep them from following. The breach sealed with a final shuddering clang as emergency bulkheads dropped into place, slamming shut on.